7 biblical signs God is quietly helping you see life more clearly. There is a moment in the spiritual journey when clarity does not come through answers, but through a change in how you see. Nothing around you may have changed yet. The same people, the same responsibilities, the same challenges. But inside, something begins to shift. Situations that once felt simple now feel layered. Reactions that once felt automatic now feel questionable. You begin to pause more, think deeper, observe longer. And at first, this can feel confusing. You may wonder why you are no longer as certain as you used to be. Why things that once made sense now feel incomplete. Why your perspective is changing in ways you cannot fully explain. It can feel like you are losing clarity, when in reality, you are being introduced to a deeper form of it, because true clarity is not immediate. It is formed. Jesus never rushed people into understanding. He spoke in ways that required reflection. He allowed space for people to wrestle with truth. Not because he wanted to make things difficult, but because real understanding is not something you receive quickly. It is something that grows within you. And this is where many people misunderstand what God is doing. They expect clarity to feel like certainty. But often, it begins as awareness. A quiet awareness that something needs to be seen differently. A subtle realization that your previous way of thinking was incomplete. A growing sense that you are being invited to look beyond appearances. This is not confusion. This is refinement. God does not only guide your path, He reshapes your perception. He teaches you how to see, not just what to do. And this process changes everything, because the way you see determines the way you live. If you see situations only on the surface, your decisions will be shallow. If you see people only through emotion, your relationships will become unstable. If you see life only through urgency, your choices will become reactive. But when God begins to form clarity in you, He slows you down. He teaches you to question what you feel, to examine what you think, to observe before you conclude. And slowly, your vision becomes more precise, not louder, not faster, but clearer. You begin to recognize patterns. You begin to notice motives. You begin to understand consequences before they unfold. And this is where everything starts to change. Because clarity is not just about understanding life. It is about understanding yourself within it. In this message, you will discover 7 biblical signs that God is quietly helping you see life more clearly. Not through dramatic revelation, but through subtle transformation. Not through pressure, but through formation. And as you listen, you may begin to recognize something familiar, not in what you are going through, but in what God is doing within you. One of the first signs that God is quietly helping you see life more clearly is this. You begin to question your initial reactions. There was a time when your first response felt trustworthy. If something made you angry, you assumed the anger was justified. If something excited you, you followed it without hesitation. If someone said something that hurt you, you immediately formed a conclusion about them. But now, something interrupts that pattern. You feel a pause, not forced. Discernment. Internal. You experience the same emotions, but you no longer move immediately with them. You begin to observe them. You start asking yourself questions before acting. Why did that affect me so strongly? Am I seeing this clearly or just reacting? Is this feeling pointing to truth or to something unresolved in me? This shift may feel uncomfortable at first, because it removes the illusion of certainty. Before, reacting quickly gave you a sense of control. It made you feel decisive. It made you feel confident. But now, you begin to realize that not every reaction is accurate. Not every emotion is reliable. Not every thought is complete. And instead of trusting your first response, you start examining it. This is where clarity begins. In Scripture, we see this principle reflected in the call to be slow to speak and slow to anger. This is not about suppression, it is about awareness. It is about creating space between what you feel and what you do. Jesus often responded in ways that revealed this kind of clarity. He did not react based on pressure, emotion, or expectation. He responded based on understanding. He saw beyond the moment. He perceived what others could not. And now, in a quieter way, that same process begins to form in you. Psychologically, this is the development of emotional regulation. You begin to separate feeling from action. You become capable of experiencing emotions without being controlled by them. Spiritually, this is discernment taking root. You begin to recognize that clarity is not about reacting faster. It is about seeing deeper. You start to notice patterns in your own behavior. You realize that certain triggers repeat themselves. Certain emotions surface in familiar situations. And instead of ignoring this, you begin to pay attention. You begin to understand yourself. And as you understand yourself, you start responding differently. You speak less, but with more intention. You react less, but with more wisdom. You decide less impulsively, but with more stability. This is not hesitation. This is formation. God is teaching you that your first reaction is not always your truest response. He is teaching you to slow down so that truth can surface beyond emotion. And once you begin to live this way, something shifts. Your life becomes less chaotic. Your relationships become less reactive. Your decisions become more grounded. You stop being driven by what you feel in the moment, and you start being guided by what you understand over time. This is the beginning of clarity. And once this awareness begins to grow, another change quietly follows. You start noticing things in others that you never saw before. Another sign that God is quietly helping you see life more clearly is this. You begin to notice inconsistencies in people that you once overlooked. There was a time when you took words at face value. If someone spoke kindly, you assumed their intentions were sincere. If someone made promises, you believed them without hesitation. If a situation appeared calm, you trusted that it was stable. But now, something deeper begins to awaken in your perception. You start to see beyond what is said. You begin to notice when words and actions do not align. You recognize when someone's tone carries something unspoken. You sense when a conversation feels forced, when kindness feels conditional, when agreement feels superficial. And this realization can feel unsettling because it changes how you interpret people. You may find yourself questioning things you once accepted. You may feel less comfortable in environments that once felt normal. You may even feel a quiet distance forming in relationships that no longer feel as genuine as they once did. This is not negativity. This is clarity. In Scripture, Jesus consistently perceived what others could not see. He recognized hypocrisy beneath religious language. He understood intentions behind polite words. He responded not only to what was spoken, but to what was hidden. This kind of perception is not about becoming suspicious. It is about becoming aware. Psychologically, this reflects an increase in pattern recognition. You begin to connect behavior over time. You stop evaluating people based on isolated moments and start understanding them through consistency. Spiritually, this reflects discernment. You begin asking yourself questions that did not occur to you before. Does this person's behavior match their words? Is this relationship built on truth or on convenience? Am I ignoring something that I can already see? These questions do not make your life harder. They make your life more honest. Discernment removes illusions. It exposes what has always been there but was previously ignored. And while this can feel uncomfortable, it is also deeply protective, because clarity allows you to make wiser decisions. You begin to set boundaries without needing conflict. You start to create distance without needing explanation. You learn to adjust your expectations without needing confrontation. You stop expecting consistency from those who have never shown it. You stop investing deeply where there is no stability. You stop trying to fix what is not yours to fix. This does not make you cold. It makes you grounded. You begin to relate to people with understanding instead of assumption. You interact with awareness instead of blind trust. You maintain peace not by avoiding truth, but by accepting it. And as this clarity develops, something important happens inside you. You stop trying to force relationships to remain the same. You begin to accept what is real. And once you begin to accept reality instead of resisting it, another shift quietly takes place. You start becoming more honest with yourself. Another sign that God is quietly helping you see life more clearly is this. You begin to recognize truths about yourself that you previously avoided. There was a time when it felt easier to focus on what others were doing wrong. It gave you clarity, or at least the feeling of it. You could explain situations, justify reactions, and move forward without looking too deeply within. But now something changes. Your attention turns inward. You begin to notice patterns in your own behavior. You recognize how certain situations trigger the same responses. You start to see how your fears influence your decisions, how your insecurities shape your reactions, how your need for control sometimes disguises itself as wisdom. And this realization is not comfortable, because it removes the distance between you and the truth. You begin to ask questions that feel personal. Why do I react this way? What am I trying to protect? Am I seeing this situation clearly? Or through my own wounds? These questions require honesty. In Scripture, there is a consistent call to examine the heart, not to condemn it, but to understand it. Because transformation does not begin with changing circumstances. It begins with recognizing what is happening inside you. Jesus often redirected attention in this way. When people focused on external behavior, he brought the conversation back to internal condition. Not because external actions do not matter, but because they are often shaped by deeper, unseen realities. Psychologically, this shift reflects growing self-awareness. You begin to observe your thoughts instead of automatically believing them. You start to understand your emotional patterns instead of being controlled by them. Spiritually, this is refinement. You begin to realize that clarity is not only about seeing others accurately, it is about seeing yourself truthfully. And this changes everything. Because once you start recognizing your own patterns, you gain the ability to change them. You are no longer reacting unconsciously. You are choosing consciously. You begin to pause before repeating the same behavior. You start to question decisions that once felt automatic. You learn to separate what you feel from what is actually true. This process is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming aware, and awareness creates freedom. You no longer feel trapped in the same cycles. You begin to step out of patterns that once defined your reactions. You start responding with intention instead of habit. This is how clarity deepens. Not by avoiding truth, but by facing it. And as this honesty becomes part of your life, something else begins to shift. You start feeling less drawn to noise, less interested in distractions, less comfortable with anything that pulls you away from clarity. You begin to crave something different. You begin to crave stillness. Another sign that God is quietly helping you see life more clearly is this. You begin to lose your appetite for noise. There was a time when constant stimulation felt normal. You filled your mind with conversations, opinions, content, and distractions without questioning how they affected you. Silence felt uncomfortable. Being alone with your thoughts felt unnecessary. You stayed occupied, and in that occupation, you avoided deeper reflection. But now something inside you resists that pattern. You start to feel overwhelmed by what once entertained you. Conversations that revolve around negativity begin to feel heavy. Environments filled with constant chatter begin to drain your energy. You notice that too much input creates confusion in your thinking, and without forcing it, you begin to step back. You start seeking quiet moments. You begin to value stillness. You feel a growing need to clear space in your mind. Not because you are withdrawing from life, but because you are learning to see it more clearly. In Scripture, we see this principle repeatedly. Jesus often withdrew from the crowd, not out of avoidance, but out of intention. He understood that clarity is strengthened in stillness. He knew that constant noise can distort perception. Psychologically, this shift reflects mental filtering. Your mind begins to reject excess stimulation because it interferes with focus. You become more aware of how information affects your thoughts, your emotions, and your decision. Spiritually, this shift reflects alignment. You begin asking yourself different questions. Does this bring clarity or confusion? Does this strengthen my peace or disturb it? Am I filling my mind? Or am I overwhelming it? These questions begin to guide your choices. You start becoming selective about what you listen to. You become more intentional about the environments you enter. You stop consuming everything without reflection. Instead, you choose what supports your clarity. Discernment teaches you that what you allow into your mind shapes how you see the world. If your mind is crowded, your vision becomes blurred. If your mind is calm, your perception becomes sharper. And as you begin to protect your inner space, something important happens. Your thoughts slow down. Your reactions become more measured. Your understanding deepens. You begin to hear yourself more clearly. You begin to notice what truly matters. You begin to separate what is essential from what is distracting. This is not isolation. This is refinement. You are not disconnecting from life. You are removing what distorts your ability to see it. And once you begin to live this way, another shift quietly follows. You start becoming more patient with the process of life itself. Another sign that God is quietly helping you see life more clearly is this. You begin to develop patience where you once felt pressure. There was a time when everything felt urgent. Decisions needed to be made quickly. Answers needed to come immediately. You felt uncomfortable when things were unclear. And that discomfort pushed you to act before you truly understood what was happening. But now something begins to slow you down. You start to realize that rushing does not always bring clarity. In fact, it often creates confusion. You notice that many of your past mistakes were not caused by lack of ability, but by lack of patience. You see how acting too quickly led to outcomes you could have avoided if you had simply waited, and this realization changes how you move. You begin to pause, not because you are unsure, but because you are becoming wise. In Scripture, patience is not presented as passivity. It is presented as strength. It is the ability to remain steady while something is still unfolding. It is the discipline of not forcing what is not yet clear. Jesus never moved under pressure. He moved with purpose. Even when people demanded immediate action, he responded according to timing, not urgency. He understood that clarity is often revealed in the process, not at the beginning. Psychologically, this shift reflects emotional regulation. You become less reactive to discomfort. You stop trying to escape uncertainty by making quick decisions. You learn to tolerate the space between question and answer. Spiritually, this shift reflects trust. You begin asking yourself different questions when faced with pressure. Is this truly urgent? Or does it only feel urgent? What might I see? If I give this more time, am I acting to resolve discomfort? Or to make a wise decision, these questions begin to reshape your behavior. You stop forcing conversations. You stop rushing commitments. You stop making decisions just to relieve anxiety. Instead, you allow situations to unfold. You observe. You wait. You gather understanding before you move. And as you begin to live this way, something changes inside you. You feel less overwhelmed. You feel less pressured. You feel more grounded. Patience creates space for clarity to emerge. It allows emotions to settle so that truth can surface. It gives you the ability to see consequences before they happen. It protects you from acting on incomplete understanding. Discernment teaches you that time is not an obstacle. It is a tool. And when you begin to trust this, your decisions become more stable. Your direction becomes more intentional. Your confidence becomes quieter, but stronger. You stop chasing quick answers. You begin to walk in steady understanding. And once this patience begins to take root, another transformation quietly follows. You start to value truth more than comfort. Another sign that God is quietly helping you see life more clearly is this: you begin to value truth more than comfort. There was a time when comfort guided many of your choices. You avoided difficult conversations. You tolerated situations that did not feel right. You accepted explanations that were easy to believe, even when something inside you sensed they were incomplete. Comfort felt safe. It allowed you to move forward without disruption. It protected you from tension. It gave you temporary peace, even if that peace was built on avoidance. But now something inside you resists that pattern. You begin to notice when comfort comes at the cost of truth. You feel it when you remain silent even though something needs to be addressed. You sense it when you accept something that does not align with what you know deep inside. And slowly, that inner tension becomes harder to ignore. This is where clarity deepens. In Scripture, truth is never presented as convenient. It often challenges. It exposes. It requires change. Jesus spoke truth, even when it created discomfort, not to harm, but to bring alignment. Because without truth, there is no real transformation. Psychologically, this shift reflects integrity. You begin to align your internal understanding with your external actions. You stop separating what you believe from how you behave. You become less willing to ignore what you already know. Spiritually, this is conviction. You begin asking yourself questions that require honesty. Am I choosing what is easy or what is true? Am I avoiding this because it is uncomfortable or because it is unwise? What is the cost of ignoring what I already see? These questions remove illusions. They force you to face reality without softening it. And although this can feel difficult, it also creates strength. Because truth stabilizes your life. You begin to make decisions that reflect clarity instead of convenience. You address situations instead of avoiding them. You speak when it matters, even if it feels uncomfortable. You walk away when necessary, even if it is not easy. This does not make your life simpler in the moment. It makes your life more stable over time. Discernment teaches you that comfort can be misleading. It can keep you in situations that limit your growth. It can prevent necessary change. It can delay decisions that need to be made. But truth moves you forward. It brings alignment between what you see and how you act. It removes confusion. It strengthens your judgment. And as this alignment begins to take root, something else quietly forms inside you. You begin to feel less dependent on how others respond to your choices. You begin to develop a steady confidence that does not require approval. Another sign that God is quietly helping you see life more clearly is this. You begin to develop a quiet confidence that no longer depends on approval. There was a time when other people's opinions carried more weight in your decisions. You looked for reassurance before moving forward. You felt more certain when others agreed with you and more uncertain when they questioned you. Approval gave you stability. Disagreement created doubt. But now something inside you becomes steadier. You still listen, you still consider advice. But you are no longer shaped by every voice around you. You begin to trust the clarity that has been forming within you. Not because you believe you know everything, but because you recognize that God has been refining how you see. This confidence is not loud. It does not seek attention. It does not need to prove itself. It moves quietly, but it remains firm. In Scripture, we see this kind of steadiness in the life of Jesus. He was surrounded by opinions, expectations, and constant pressure to conform, yet he remained aligned with truth. He did not adjust his direction to gain approval. He did not compromise clarity to avoid conflict. His confidence came from alignment, not acceptance. Psychologically, this shift reflects emotional independence. You begin to regulate your sense of worth, internally instead of externally. You are less affected by praise, less shaken by criticism. Your stability becomes rooted in understanding rather than validation. Spiritually, this reflects trust. You begin asking yourself different questions when facing decisions. Am I acting in alignment with what I know is true? Am I remaining faithful even if this is not understood? Does this choice bring peace? To my conscience, these questions become anchors. They keep you steady when opinions shift. They protect your focus when pressure builds. They allow you to move forward without needing constant confirmation. Discernment teaches you that confidence is not about being certain of every outcome. It is about being clear in your direction. And as this clarity strengthens, something changes in the way you live. You stop adjusting yourself to fit expectations. You stop explaining every decision. You stop seeking validation for what you already understand. Instead, you begin to walk with quiet assurance. You make decisions with intention. You accept that not everyone will agree. You remain grounded even when others do not fully understand your path. This is not isolation. This is stability. You are no longer driven by external approval. You are guided by internal clarity. And this is where discernment reaches a deeper level. Because once you are no longer dependent on approval, you are free to live with integrity. Final reflection: seeing life more clearly is not something that happens all at once. It is something that unfolds gradually, through moments that reshape how you think, how you feel, and how you respond. It begins in small shifts that are easy to overlook. A pause before reacting, a question before deciding, a sense that something needs to be understood more deeply before moving forward. At first, these changes may feel like uncertainty. You may feel less sure of yourself, less quick to act, less comfortable with immediate answers. But this is not confusion. It is the beginning of clarity taking form inside you. Because true clarity does not rush, it is built. God does not simply give you answers. He teaches you how to see. He reshapes your perception so that you can understand life beyond surface appearances. He trains your mind to recognize patterns, your heart to discern motives, and your spirit to respond with wisdom instead of impulse. This process requires patience. It requires you to slow down when everything around you moves quickly. It requires you to sit with questions instead of escaping them. It requires you to face truths that are not always comfortable, but are always necessary. And through this process, something steady begins to grow inside you. You become less reactive. less influenced by pressure, less dependent on external validation. Your thoughts become clearer. Your decisions become more intentional. Your relationships become more honest. You begin to live with awareness instead of assumption. You begin to walk with understanding instead of impulse. And Chimi realized that once felt once actually preparation. Preparation for a life guided by discernment. Preparation for decisions made with clarity. Preparation for a faith that is not based on emotion, but on understanding. God is not only guiding your path, He is shaping how you see the path. And when your vision becomes clear, your steps become steady. This message reflects a spiritual understanding shaped through experience, reflection, and the ongoing process of learning how faith develops in real life. Growth has never been immediate or perfect. It has come through moments of questioning, correction, and deeper awareness. Sharing these insights is part of a personal journey of refinement, with the hope that these reflections bring clarity and light to your thoughts, just as similar lessons continue to shape mine. If this message helped you recognize what God may be doing in your life, write in the comments, "I am learning to see life clearly," and carry this with you. God is not rushing your understanding. He is forming it.